Jeez. Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night. We're all still alive. We're moshing with the apocalypse. As usual. I don't know, we got Wham here with us tonight, but I saw some article, and I don't know how legit it was, but something about the Earth's core turning backwards.
Oh, yeah. I guess it does that every now and then. Every 70 years, it stops and reverses and then stops and goes the other way. And it's perfectly normal.
So it's perfectly normal because I know I hear a lot about the magnetic fields and pole shifts and and he throw in all the energy weapon stuff. We talked to Andy about that, which I know some of that's kooky, but there is some truth to it. I just saw a big article about our military making a laser that they shoot from space. That's like something from G.I. Joe versus Cobra or something. But
we just lost Bruce again. So I told him that if he went away to just dial back in.
Okay, I wonder why he's dropping that.
Well, it's just probably.
Who knows?
Who knows?
But my point is, here he goes. But yeah, we got Bruce Hallenbeck here tonight, Hallenbeck, and we're going to be talking about his book, The Kinderhook Creature, and Beyond, Small Town Monsters book. And my point is, with all this, we got you, Bruce. My point with all this core stuff and energy weapons and pole shifts, it's the crazies. You ever see that movie? It's like everyone's going crazy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of crazy, weird, some dude went nuts in a Walmart parking lot and attacked a school bus, and the police had to mow him down. Crazy, weird stories like that. Just people going crazy. It's kind of like a zombie apocalypse or something. I just wonder if all this stuff's making everyone crazy. All this crazy core backwards and pole shifts and magnetic fields and God knows what else.
He's gone again. I tell you what. Here's the thing, Jeffrey. He's going to come and go, so we could just talk about the book anyway. Yeah. Because I can tell you about the book. So and then Bruce, whenever he shows up and it works, he can talk about it some more.
All right. I just wonder why we've had a lot of technical issues. At first, his mic was very low, and it wasn't his fault. It was something technical that I don't understand. Now we got him on his phone, and it's working, but for some reason it keeps disconnecting. So let's see. There he is.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
I can hear you at least. There you go.
There you go. I don't know if your internet's dropping or what, but just keep coming back. Well, tell us, Bruce, a little bit about the Kinderhook Creature. What got you started on that? What was the catharsis to write a paranormal book with small town monsters?
Say now he's frozen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. It all started back when I was about 11 years old. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
We hear you.
Yes.
Okay. When I was in 6th grade, I read a book called The Maybe Monsters by a guy named Gardner Soule. And it was about the Loch Ness Monster and, the Yeti and Bigfoot and all those things. So I became very interested in cryptozoology, although I don't think they had that word back then. And, it was just kind of something that I was interested in. And then about...
Nope. See, he's gotten frozen.
And I know he did the book with, for some reason he's having some tech stuff. But the book is with Small Town Monsters Publishing, and we've had them on before, Seth, and talked about some documentaries. I forget which one, but I think it's their first book because I didn't see any other books on the site. I think it's the first book they put out.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, this book is also sort of a biography. It's sort of a paranormal biography because Bruce has had, and just for our viewers' sake, I interviewed Bruce for my book, Mysterious Beauty. So I know a little bit I mean, I'm not as an expert on Bruce, but I know a little bit about his background because he shared that with me, and gave me a kind of a brief summation of some of the stories in this book that then appear in this book, in the interview. And so essentially, he'll probably, and just to tell you a little bit about his context and what's in the book, he lives in Kinderhook, New York, which is about, I don't know, 60, 70 miles north and east of where I live. It is on the Hudson Valley. And Kinderhook is the place where Washington Irving got his inspiration for the story of the Headless Horseman in Sleepy Hollow. Now, what's interesting about what Irving did, and this is what Bruce talks about in the book, what's interesting about it is that the characters in the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and to some degree Rip Van Winkle, the characters are taken from actual people in Kinderhook, and then were put into the context of Sleepy Hollow, which was a hamlet that is further south, much closer to New York, what is now New York City. Now, actually, Sleepy Hollow is like a hamlet that's a suburb of New York City. But Bruce actually lives in the town and in the hamlet of Kinderhook, which is this place that is sort of legendary for haunted things. So he sort of lives within that context. Are you there, Bruce? Can you hear us? Yeah, we're having some real transmission problems tonight.
Someone, Juggalo Squatcher Blake Downing said, "Dude's got dial-up." No, I don't think that.
No,
it made me laugh.
No. Well, I can tell you this personally. I can tell you this personally because I'm familiar with the internet and with phone service here in the Hudson Valley. We have trouble sometimes with our cell towers. I mean, I myself with my phone, if I go outside my house, I can get relatively decent coverage, but to make a phone call inside my house, I have to use Wi-Fi in my phone. So, okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, for the moment anyway, huh?
Yeah, I was telling them about Kinderhook.
Okay.
Tell us cool stuff about it.
Yes. Kinderhook is where I'm at right now, and apparently we have terrible phone service, but other than that, it's a pretty interesting place.
Yes, I was telling them about Washington Irving and Kinderhook, and
yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow was my favorite story, and I really, dug the fact that right down the road from here, there's a bridge that crosses the Kinderhook Creek, and I thought that must be the bridge where Ichabod Crane ran away from the Headless Horseman. And I'd like to think that, although actually the story was set near Tarrytown, but Washington Irving took all the characters, based them on people here in Kinderhook. Ichabod Crane was a guy named Jesse Merwin. Katrina Van Tassel was Katrina Van Allen. Brom Bones was Brom Van Alstyne, all that stuff. So both towns kind of claim it, right. But it has a very rich kind of atmosphere, especially around Halloween. And I grew up with that, and of course I was interested in strange things from a very young age. And when the Kinderhook creature came along, it was kind of like, wow, it's like Santa Claus is real. I mean, it was such a bizarre thing to happen. Although I had incidences in my childhood that were a bit strange, and actually throughout my whole life. But the Kinderhook creature was kind of like the pièce de résistance.
Definitely. What were some of the paranormal experiences you had when you were younger? Was it ghost or UFO or what was going on?
That's the blob thing, right?
Yeah, the blob. I mean, it kind
Gotta
of
hear
ran the
about the
gamut.
blob.
You know what's funny is that there's a website called the Kinderhook Blob. Well, it's
Hmm.
a blog. It's a blob blog, and I don't know who put that up there, but they got the story, I think, from one of the books I wrote. And when I was about 9 or 10 years old, my cousin Sherry and I were, playing up in the woods behind my grandparents' house, and I heard this high-pitched whistling sound, and I turned to see the source of the sound, and there was this sort of white, bluish white, blobbish thing that seemed to be looking at me from behind a tree, although it didn't really have any eyes I could see, but I felt it was looking at me. And of course, being 9 or 10 years old, I said to my cousin, "Let's get out of here." And we, took off down the hill. And that was that. At the time, you could pass it off as childhood imagination, maybe. But then about 2 or 3 years later, my boyhood friend Jerome was down in the woods, down near the spring that was down there, around which a lot of strange things seemed to happen. And I was up at my grandparents' house, and he was down there in the woods doing something. And he came running up to the porch where I was just coming out, and he said, "You won't believe what I just saw down there. It was like a big blob that just kind of came down the hill." He said it was like a bell-shaped thing. And at first I thought he was pulling my leg. So I said, "Okay, we'll get that thing." So, I grabbed a pitchfork and he grabbed something else. And, we took off like the villagers in the old movies, and we were going to find this blob. And we were walking through the woods, and this is in broad daylight. And suddenly he stopped and he pointed straight ahead up in a tree. And he said, "Look up there." And yes, I saw a white or bluish white shape up in the tree. And of course, being around 12 years old at the time, I said, "Let's get out of here." And we dropped our weapons and ran. And okay, fast forward to about 15 years later, and two of my cousins were down in the woods, same woods, and they had a lean-to down there. And this again was in the daytime. And they said that they saw a strange thing coming down the hill. Now, it's an interesting story because my cousin Barry, who is Protestant, saw a bell-shaped thing coming down the hill, and my cousin Russell, who is Catholic, saw the Virgin Mary coming down the hill.
Wow.
And of course, they took off and ran. I thought that was very interesting because apparently, whatever this thing is, it has something to do with your perception of what it is. And I found out, thanks to one of these Kinderhook blogs, that there have been more recent sightings of this. There were two guys who were walking through some woods in Kinderhook in 2017, and they saw. They heard the whistling sound that I heard when I was a kid, and they looked up and they saw this white shape flying over their heads. And it was, it sounded almost exactly like the experience I had when I was a little kid. And my father, who's a total skeptic, was out on his tractor one day. This was maybe 20 years ago or so. And he saw this white, he called it a blob, that flew over his head and, flew down below the horizon in the woods. So whatever this thing is, I seem to have been instrumental in making it part of the folklore of Kinderhook. There's even a blob sticker, Kinderhook blob sticker you can buy on eBay for something like $30. I don't know who sells that either. So
It's
somebody's
amazing.
making money off the Kinderhook blob. I don't know who.
We've been talking about these kind of experiences for 15 years, and basically do the show because we've had these experiences. Mine happened after testicular cancer, and my dad died when I was 17, and a few years later my dad died. I started to have UFO sightings and see different types of beings, from beings of light to hooded beings to weirder stuff. And I've read in a lot of stuff in interviews. There's like they kind of compare it to a trickster energy that kind of morphs to your perception. And I don't know if all of those are trickster, but it's interesting how you said that, how things appear to what you believe. And that's come up in this kind of stuff before, but just the way you said it and everything, it definitely hits home. There's something to that, how it bends. It's like a weird Star Trek entity that, or something.
Yeah.
It's definitely fascinating.
Yeah, it seems to feed on your mind somehow, and whatever you have in your mind, it sort of makes it real. Like the blob that I saw reminded me of Casper the Friendly Ghost, actually, because it had this big bulbous shape to it. And when I was a kid, I was a big fan of the Casper cartoons. So it does seem to have something to do with your perception.
It's definitely fascinating. So with the Sleepy Hollow, what's the guys, the dude with the headless horseman? What's the story that kind of correlates with that? There's a true story that's from. What's the connection?
Well, I mean, Washington Irving based his story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, on actually an old German legend about a headless soldier, a Hessian soldier, actually. So I don't think there's necessarily any real truth to that story, but I've always loved the story, especially the Walt Disney cartoon adaptation of that. I always loved that when I was a kid. But I mean, Kinderhook is kind of uh, you know bathed in this sort of atmosphere of folklore and tradition. And there are a couple of houses down the road from where we live that are supposedly haunted. Lindenwald, which is haunted supposedly by the ghost of Martin Van Buren, the eighth president of the U.S. So we have a presidential ghost in Kinderhook, which is kind of neat. And right next door to that is the Van Allen house, which was the Katrina Van Tassel house in the Headless Horseman story, and that's supposedly haunted as well. So it's just a grand old tradition here in Kinderhook, which
Well,
I'm
we
very
definitely. Well, just wanted to get the headless horseman in there. We don't get to talk about that very much, and I know everyone loves that. I found an old '80s Jeff Goldblum movie where he's I guess Ichabod Crane, and I got it from
yeah.
somewhere. I haven't seen that yet, but I was like, man, this old as crap. But Jeff Goldblum, I'm in.
Yeah, it was for some reason that movie was filmed in Utah. I don't know why they didn't film it here, but
Yeah,
you know,
I still need to see it. And then,
yeah,
of course, the who can forget Christopher Walken as that? That
yeah,
was the
right,
greatest for sure. Sleepy Hollow. Well,
yeah.
tell us. It's always fascinating, these small town monster stories. How these events happen, from Mothman to the Lizard Man in the Carolinas to I know there's a place, Willow Creek in California. I know that because of that Bobcat Goldthwait movie, which I think I've heard of Bigfoot before that. But these stories where what was the one I just looked, Ridge, the one where the white Bigfoots and the UFO and military came out, Chestnut Ridge. I know that's one of their DVDs, but it's just fascinating. Not only because we don't know if it really happened. I'd like to presume yes, something really happened, but maybe with some of them we don't know. But who knows? I've seen weird stuff, so I know weird happens. So I'm not.
Mhm.
I think something's going on. But what's weird is how these towns memorialize it with like memorials and a parade, and I guess it's people trying to cash in. But it's fascinating on that kind of level. But come on in for the Bigfoot 2-for-1 tire special or 2-for-1 cheeseburger, and that's
Yeah.
what small town monsters. And they interview witnesses who seem very credible. So, I'm not disagreeing with any of the stories. I wasn't there. I don't know. But tell us about the Kinderhook creature. What happened? Was it what can you tell us about it? Like, what was the story? What's some of the bones of it?
Well, actually, the reason that I wrote the book is because Small Town Monsters came here to do one of their documentaries. It was called On the Trail of Bigfoot: The Journey, and they came here and also to Whitehall, New York, which is another small town that had a lot of Bigfoot sightings in the 70s. Ours took place mostly in the 80s, And in the late 70s, I read a story in a now defunct magazine called Hudson River Chronicle about local Bigfoot sightings. And at the time, I was kind of skeptical. I thought, okay, I can understand that in the Himalayas and the Pacific Northwest, but not in Kinderhook. I don't, or Columbia County here in New York didn't seem very likely. But shortly after I read that story, um, my cousin found some strange footprints in the snow in the woods behind my grandparents' house, and I took some pictures of them, sent them to the Hudson River Chronicle, and they promptly lost them, by the way. But we thought they were unusual in that they didn't really look like bear tracks. They looked like something slightly different. At the time, I wasn't really pursuing this, but at a little bit later, about a year after that, my grandmother happened to look out her kitchen window one morning, and she saw something sleeping in the yard. Apparently, something lying down in the yard that was very long or tall and dark, and it was almost in a fetal position. And she looked away for a second, and when she looked back, it was gone. She didn't tell anybody about this at the time because she thought maybe people would think she was going a little batty. But after that, she started noticing that something was taking her trash bags from the back porch where she put them in a garbage can. They would take the trash bags out, take them down into the yard, and untie them and take out all the food stuff. Now, a raccoon or something wouldn't do that. Neither would a bear. They would just tear the bag apart. But this, whatever it was, just delicately untied it. And this happened several times. And then she found out that one of her neighbors had an experience where her trash bag ended up in a tree. And this was pretty mystifying. Around that same time, I had a friend visiting from England, and she was at my grandparents' house one evening. We were watching TV, and then I told her I'd walk her to where she was staying. And as we went out on the back porch, the security light came on, and as soon as the light came on, I heard this ungodly sound coming from the depths of the woods. It was something I'd never heard before. It started like a shriek or a scream, went into a series of guttural sounds, and then sort of died out in a low moan. And my friend from England looked at me and said, "Is that a typical American sound to hear at night?" And I said, "Nope, never heard that one." Now, as it was dark, I wasn't going to go looking in the woods to see what it was. I kind of wish I had at this point, but oh well. And a couple of months later, my grandmother was being brought home by my Aunt Barbara, and just as she got out of the car, they heard this horrible noise coming from around the shed behind the house. And the sound, she said, was like a person in terrible agony or moaning or something like that. But not exactly a person, just a very loud volume. And my my Aunt Barbara was so panicked. She said, "Get in the car, Mom," and then she locked all the doors before my grandmother could get in the car. But so what happened ultimately was that my Aunt Barbara went home to get her son Barry, who had a shotgun, and my grandmother went in the house in her house and just sat there in her chair with a hammer just in case anything tried to break into the house. And when my aunt got back, the thing was still making crazy noises. And my cousin got up on the porch with his shotgun, and he shot it off once up in the air just to make a noise. And the thing screamed, whatever it was. And then he shot it off again, and he said flame came out of the barrel this time. And he heard the thing seemed like it ran away. It sounded like it ran away. But he also heard another sound. He thought there might have been two of these things. I missed all of this because I was out with friends that evening. And when I got home, it was like pandemonium. Everybody was talking about what happened. And my grandmother said, she could see a shadow of something around the shed because it was a bright moonlit night. I remember that. And she said it was, something that had kind of a pointed head and long arms in the shadow. And so that kind of started, that really piqued my interest right there. That's for sure. And then I started investigating other people's experiences and found that there were a number of people throughout the county and other counties nearby that had seen or heard this thing. There was one very good sighting by a woman who was driving home from work in Albany, New York, and she just got to the county line, the Columbia County line, and she saw this large ape-like thing cross the road in front of her. She said it had reddish brown hair or fur, very long arms. It was swinging gracefully, and it went off into a cornfield across the road and disappeared. There was another gentleman who was fishing near a dam near Kinderhook, and this was in the daytime, and he happened to look across the creek, and he saw this creature standing there looking at him. And he said it was very tall and sort of reddish brown hair. And he even said that he could see it so well. He said the fingernails were black. And it was just staring at him. And then it just proceeded to walk away into the forest. So it turned out there were many, many people who experienced this thing. They wrote a series of letters to a journalist at the Times Union newspaper named Barney Fowler, who had an outdoor column, and he got so many letters he finally had to call a stop to it. He said, we have to go on to another subject. But there were people from all over the place who had experienced this, and this whole flap went on from around 1980 through 1982 or 3, and then it seemed to die down. But I still from time to time get reports. In fact, I just spoke to a gentleman recently who said back in the early 80s he was hunting in Stuyvesant, which is near Kinderhook, and he saw this figure standing off in the distance. First he thought it might be a person, but then he realized it was much larger than a person, and it didn't have a gun either. It was in hunting season, and it just stared at him and then just walked off into the woods. So the stories keep coming, and I keep trying to collect them. It's an amazing tale. It's really, when I think about it, about what happened in the early 80s, it's almost like, did that really happen? But yes, it did. Sure did.
Was there any UFO stuff at all, or anything you've ever seen, or anything like that with UFO kind of stuff?
Well, yes. That's also in my book because my book is called The Kinderhook Creature and Beyond, and it's a personal reminiscence of experiences that I've had and other people that I know personally, either my family or friends or whatever. And of course, back in the early 80s, there was a famous Westchester wing, which was seen all up and down the Hudson Valley, mostly on the New York Thruway and in Connecticut and all over the place. And just before that, again, it was my grandmother and me. We saw some very strange objects in the sky over the Catskills. And because we had a window that looks out over the Catskill Mountains. And one evening, just before sunset, we happened to look out the window, and there were 4 or 5 reddish orange balls of light that must have been enormous because they were very far away, like I said, over the mountains. And they were doing all these crazy things. They would shoot out into and do 180-degree turns. They would stop on a dime. They would come together in a cluster, and then they would shoot out again and go all over the place and do the same things. And then finally, they all separated and sort of drifted off. And we were so mesmerized by these things for 5 or 10 minutes, we didn't even think to take a picture. But that was an amazing sight. And years later, after the Westchester Wing flap was pretty much over, some friends of mine and I were driving up the Taconic Parkway, and um, the driver's wife, who was in the front seat, all of a sudden she shouted out, "What was that? What was that? What was that?" And I thought maybe there was an accident or something. I looked off toward the road, but I missed what she was seeing, which was, as she described it later, a boomerang-shaped object or triangular. And she actually drew a picture of it, which is in the book. So that, to me, is the Westchester Wing. That's what it sounds like. And thousands of people saw that throughout the 80s. It's one of the best documented UFO sightings in history. So, yeah, there's been a lot of activity around these parts.
I had a UFO sighting that you reminded me of that looked just like those that you were describing. And I was outside and I saw these like 3 or 4 weird reddish, kind of orangish energy things in the sky. I called them fireflies. And it was almost like it knew I saw them. I screamed like a girl, and my brother and nephew came out and saw them so I could get them to come out. And at that time, I just started. I've told this story a million times, but I'll just give you the short version real quick. I was trying to get interviews from my show when I first started and having trouble, and I said a prayer, had that weird UFO sighting, and then the next thing you know, I was on the phone with Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist, Nick Pope, British Mod of the Fence, and Lloyd Pye of the Star Child Skull. He's passed, but Jim Mars, the guy that did the JFK book and the movie with Oliver Stone, he has the alien agenda. It's like I started talking to all these people. Like, did aliens help me get the hookup? It felt like that. But when you were telling that story of the red energy, it made me remember mine because they look just like that. So it's always fascinating. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you ever seen Dan Aykroyd's UFOs Unplugged. It's on YouTube. If you put, the actor Dan Aykroyd, if you put Dan Aykroyd UFOs Unplugged in YouTube, he has a documentary where he's smoking a cigar as Dan Aykroyd, the actor. He loves UFOs, and there's a lot of footage in it. You would enjoy that. Check it out sometime. It's on YouTube for free. But thanks for sharing that story. But what's up with the house? Are you in that house now that you mentioned in the book that your grandparents, and there's been a lot of stuff there? I know Wham said something about gremlins, but is that it sounds like you're in the Evil Dead cabin. What's going on there?
Well, nothing nasty. It's always been very benign, whatever is going on here. But one of the strangest things that ever happened to me was when I was in my early 20s. And I was walking out behind this house, which I'm at now. There's a field in the back, and there's woods there. And again, this was in broad daylight. And I saw this man with his back to me at the edge of the woods, and he was digging for something. And he was a small man, and he had on an olive green shirt and olive green pants. And I thought, well, that's pretty strange because usually we don't have any people coming onto our property, and we have like 7 acres of land, and it's pretty unusual to see strangers here. So I called out to the guy. I said, "What are you doing here?" And he didn't answer me. He didn't act like he even heard me. And I called out to him several times, and he just ignored me. So I went back to the house and got my grandmother, and she came out with me. We both called out to the guy. Again, he ignored us. And then one time we called out to him, and he sort of half turned around. But the weird thing was, even though it was broad daylight, you couldn't really see the features on his face. It was almost like he didn't have any features on his face. And then he just turned back and went back to his digging. Now this this was so strange, but it gets even stranger because the next thing I remember, we were back in the house, and we were sitting at the dining room table, and we said to each other, why did we come back here? And we couldn't really fathom why we came back, and I didn't even remember coming back to the house. So we went back out to the field, and the man was not there, nor was there any place where anybody had been digging. That to me is a really strange thing to
You
happen.
say he was wearing green, and it was a leprechaun hiding his gold, was it?
Well, you know, in the book, I have a chapter about elementals and wood spirits and fairies. Quite honestly, the Native Americans had legends about fairies too. They called them pukwudgies, and it seems like almost every culture has a legend about little people. And if you read the books of Jacques Vallée, who is one of my favorite authors in this topic, he writes about the similarities between fairy sightings and alien sightings, between fairy lights and UFOs. I find that very, very fascinating. And he talks too about the cosmic trickster, the fact that we seem to see something of what we expect to see culturally, but it can't be explained in any easy way. And his theory is not so much that they're aliens, but that there's something that we just don't understand, some force or something that just is beyond our understanding. And it's interesting what you said about the UFOs that you saw, and that you felt that they knew you were looking at them, because I felt the same thing. I felt like these lights in the sky were kind of putting on a show for us. Why? I have no idea, but that's the way I felt. And I also felt that, when we saw this man digging, that we had such a strange reaction to it, going back to the house, and yet I don't remember going back to the house. It's almost like there was some kind of missing time. I felt that I was looking at something that I wasn't supposed to see, if that makes any sense. And it's just, a fascinating side note to me.
Definitely. Anything you want to ask, Swam?
Yeah, tell the story of the missing coleus. That is my favorite. That is my favorite story of yours. It is so bizarre.
Yeah, that's a bizarre one.
What's a coleus?
It's a coleus plant. It's a house plant.
Okay.
It's a house plant.
Yeah. My grandmother used to have a coleus plant, and she had it set up in the dining room. It was set up on one of these old metal tables that there was an indentation in the middle of it, so the pot was in the middle, and then there were two sides that went up higher than the pot. Yeah. Anyway, I walked out in the kitchen one night, and I heard a crash from the dining room, and it sounded like the plant just, the whole pot just fell on the floor. Well, it did, except that it was standing upright. And the strangest thing of all was that the coleus plant was gone, was nowhere to be seen. Now, my grandmother had been sitting in the living room when the pot hit the floor, and she saw what happened. And she said that it didn't fall. It actually went up and over across the sides of this metal table, and then went straight down. Now, there was no spillage of any dirt. There was nothing on the floor, and there was nothing in the pot. The plant was gone. I mean, the dirt was there, but that was it. And we never found it. We never could locate where the coleus plant went. That, unless it can teleport, I don't know. I mean, I can't explain it. I mean, there are a lot of things I can't explain, and that's one of them.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that a great story? I love that story because I know about coleus plants because it's one of my mom's favorite plants. And so, it's just kind of like I mean, I had a very strange experience with something that just disappeared too and was never found. I mean, it was this happened when I was in I was I was a freshman in college, and I was working at the library, and there was, I was one of these people that always was finding books at the bookstore that I couldn't afford. But what I would do at the bookstore, I would give them, this was the college bookstore, I would give them money as a deposit to hold it, right? And then try to come up with the rest of the money. And so I borrowed like $10, a $10 bill from a coworker of mine. I had an army jacket on. It was a completely intact army jacket. It had a pocket here that was, one of those pockets completely intact. I took the $10 bill, and I somehow knew that I wasn't really supposed to be doing this. I felt kind of a sense of shame about having to borrow money from this person. And I took the $10 bill, folded it up in the normal way you fold up a $10 bill. I stuck it in my pocket, and it was one of those pockets that had a button down top. You could close it and button it. And so I stuck it in there. I buttoned it, and I walked, and I did not deviate. I walked straight. I had to walk through a building and a half, but I walked straight to the bookstore. I didn't stop anywhere. I didn't do anything. I walked straight to the bookstore. Probably took me 7 minutes. Got to the bookstore. I undid it and reached in, and it was gone. I mean, it was gone. And there were no holes in the pocket. My friend had seen me put it in. I retraced my steps. I did everything I could think of that could possibly, even remotely, could have happened to make that $10 bill disappear. It couldn't have fallen out because it was closed and buttoned, and you know what I mean? And it was never found. It never showed up anywhere. And I had to pay her back anyway, and I didn't get the book because I didn't have the money to make a deposit on it. So it was just like, okay, I guess somebody doesn't want me to get this book. How bizarre. I've had a couple of other weird things like that where things have just disappeared. Things have just disappeared, and I've never found them.
Yeah. Yeah, you wonder if they go into a black hole.
Yeah, it's like that somewhere in the universe did all of a sudden somebody like open something and out popped this weird thing that they didn't know what it was. You know what I mean? It's like they see this $10 bill, they're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, I know. It's there's so little we know about the universe in general.
Exactly.
I mean, it far outweighs what we do know. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange.
And this is Small Town Monsters' first book. I didn't see any other ones. Is this their first book?
There's another. They did a children's book, which I think came out around the same time. Okay. But yeah, certainly one of their first books. That's for sure.
I like their documentaries. I've had them on before, and I try to get every one of them, but now there's so many I'm behind a lot, so I have a bunch.
Yeah. Well, they're very dedicated to their work, and they're really nice people. I mean, they're a nice bunch of folks.
Yep, I like the documentaries for sure. I like Stan Gordon. You familiar with Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania?
Yep.
I've had him on before. I need to get him on again, but he's got some crazy cases over there, and he's been doing this a long time. I know he's in a lot of their documentaries, but he has some books I need to catch up on too. I have a bunch of his books, but it's just definitely fascinating. It's even more fascinating when you have these experiences, and that's kind of what draws you to it. Is that what happened with you? You had the experiences, and it kind of drew you into this world?
Well, yeah, like I said, I read a book when I was very young about cryptozoology, and I thought it was interesting, but I didn't really expect it to end up in my own backyard, so to speak, with a Bigfoot type creature. But yeah, I mean, certainly I was kind of skeptical, but I was interested. But then when it started happening to my own family, my skepticism was eroded very quickly.
One of the things that fascinates me about it is a lot of people I talk to who've had these experiences have had a lot of suffering. Like, for instance, my story 17, find out you have cancer, you lose a testicle. Hey, Roku, how are you tonight? But we're on Roku tonight. That's what I'm told. It's like, hey, how you doing? But that pain, along with losing my dad, from medicine men and stuff and women I've talked to, it opens your senses. And
Yeah.
also, I got drawn into the occult and reading all that kind of stuff. And it's like you kind of draw it to you. But there's something about that pain. It's kind of like Pinhead, it draws you in, and then it's all there from then. But I opened the box. But I'd be dead if I opened the box. But it's interesting how that, and some of my UFO stuff, I have PTSD from some of it. It's so weird. Like, there was one time I was in this house, funny enough, on Bermuda Street, and there were UFO sightings over the house that I lived at. Someone took a picture of the witch in my yard and put it in my mailbox, which was kind of creepy. I know at one point I was walking around with a white painted face, listening to Pink Floyd or something, and God knows what, but they probably saw me outside. But at that particular point, I was inside the house and I saw flashing white lights in the windows, and it was something weird and alien, like they were in my windows. And later I went outside into the yard. That's where I saw that fat little weird Buddha apparition that may have been my dad messing with me. It was like a fat Chinese statue of Buddha you see at a Chinese food restaurant, but it looked alive and gray and weird, and then it vanished. But one of the weirdest things there I saw was lights in the trees, and they were not fireflies or whatever. It was weird, like weird glowing lights in the trees, to where you're like, is there Christmas lights plugged in there? No, what is that? But there was a lot of weird stuff that happened on Bermuda Street. Another weird thing was I saw underneath a street light a woman standing, a man floating like Indian style, and what looked like a guy with a dragon head. Maybe it was a helmet. I don't know what the hell it was. It's like I was having a D&D psychedelic flashback or something, but I saw it visually. And I don't know, but there was some weird stuff that happened to that house. It's interesting. A lot of my experiences happened in Georgia. And I've talked to a lot of other people that have had experiences there. And in the Bigfoot situation, Jay, our co-host, has seen a Bigfoot before. I've never seen a Bigfoot. I thought I did when I was a kid, but it was kind of confusing. But as far as have you had any kind of Bigfoot stuff? I know you've told some stories that you had the trash bag thing, right? That could have been possibly that.
Well, yeah, that was the theory anyway. And the whole Bigfoot flap of the early '80s was an amazing time. As I said, it kind of died down then. But I still hear reports from time to time, and there are a lot of reports from Whitehall, which is about 80 or 90 miles north, and they're so into Bigfoot up there, they actually have a statue of it in the center of the town. So they're much more proud of it than Kinderhook. Kinderhook is like old money, and people are kind of snooty around here, and they don't really want to talk about it much. I have to kind of dig for these stories in Kinderhook, but up in Whitehall, they're pretty open about it.
I see a picture in the book of the fairy ring that you took a picture of. It's like a ring during UFO sightings.
Right. It was during the 1983 flap of the Westchester Wing, and it was just off the road where we live, and I saw this glowing ring, and I snapped a photo of it, which didn't come out very well, but it's in the book because it was glowing in the dark, and I realized that that can be fungus and all that stuff, but this was a perfect circle, and also it was not in grass as the fungus would be. It was on gravel, So I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. And had there been any reports from that area, nocturnal lights or anything that had been reported?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily at exactly that same time, but certainly in this area in general, there have been quite a few. Aside from what my grandmother and I saw, my uncle saw something strange a little bit earlier than that. He was driving along the road one night near Stuyvesant, which is right next to Kinderhook, and there were these big power lines on the one side of the road, and near the power lines, he saw this object kind of hovering. He said it was diamond shaped, and it was like red and blue lights, and didn't make a sound, didn't do anything. It just hovered there, and he was a guy who was pretty skeptical of these things, and he didn't really want to talk about it, but he eventually did because it bothered him. It was something he couldn't explain. And in the book, I say that I can't explain most of these things. I don't have any solid theories on what any of these things are really. But that's what makes them interesting to me, is that I can explain them.
And it's good to say I don't know. That's a good thing.
Yep.
And just say I don't know. I had a UFO sighting with a friend of these black triangles over power lines, and we had a golden ball of light come down out of them. And then later I asked him about that. He don't remember it for crap, and I do, plain as day. But it's kind of weird to where you're like, did they take me? I don't think so, but I don't remember much else but that. But it's weird. Maybe I wonder if they do something from the power lines, like take power from it or something, because I've seen some of the power lines. They're refueling.
I mean, there are a lot of UFO reports over power lines and also, of course, over nuclear plants.
Yes.
And what that means, I don't know, again, but very interesting.
We've had Captain Robert Salas on. He wrote a book about those UFOs coming to his base and shutting down the missile silos. And this dude's still enlisted and has this book, Robert Salas, Salas. But the whole story is about them coming and shutting down the nukes and stuff. Or something happened weird where they were there and they shut down something. And he wrote a book about it. They had to allow him to do it. So probably more like concerns of us blowing ourselves all to hell, maybe. I know I heard lately a lot of these Foo Fighters are showing up again, and UFO sightings are off the charts right now. And people are seeing that somewhere they're seeing those Foo Fighters again. Not that I trust Russia, but they even had some weird story where they said they shot down a UFO, which could have been a drone or whatever, who knows, but they said it was a golden ball of light that they shot down. Still creepy when they put that over their news, no matter. Anybody puts that over their news is creepy, but that was just out, that story.
It's interesting that in the past couple of years, UFOs have become almost respectable because the Pentagon has admitted that they have investigated UFOs and that they're still investigating them, and they've released a lot of the videos that pilots have seen of the UFOs. So it's almost become accepted that there's something that we just don't understand, and now there's a new name for them, UAPs, unidentified real phenomena, which I guess makes it more official. I don't know, but whatever you call them, they're pretty strange.
Definitely. I think they're right here with us. I mean, there may be some that come in from other places, but I think it's a phenomenon that's right here with us. And like you said, it's been around since the fairy days, the wee folk days. Yeah. It's always been here, and it just changes. It changes based on our perceptions. Now it's aliens and grays, or whatever. When it's just like a weird thing that lives in the hollow earth in Antarctica. But is this your first paranormal book?
No. I've written several. I co-wrote a book with Lauren Coleman called Monsters in New Jersey. The first book I wrote was Monsters of the North Woods, which was co-written with Paul Bartholomew and his brother Robert and a guy named William Brand. And that was mainly about the Whitehall sightings, but also included a chapter on the Kinderhook creature. And I also wrote a book called Monsters of New York, which is everything from from alligators in the sewers to of which there actually were some, believe it or not, and Lake Champlain monster and things like that.
You have plans to do anything else paranormal in the future, or is you taking a break? What are you doing now?
Well, actually, right now I'm writing a book about Mel Brooks, so that's a little bit different. But
That's cool. That's cool.
um,
That's interesting.
yeah, but no, I mean, I'm a writer who takes assignments, and I guess whatever comes my way is what I'll be writing about next. But I do love to write about the paranormal because it's very close to my heart.
Definitely. And I want to squeeze some Hammer in there. Did you write a book about the Hammer films, or I know you've done some work about that?
I have
He's the
written several
expert.
books.
He's the expert.
I love I've tried to buy. They're hard to find, but anytime I see the collections of DVDs or the Blu-rays, there was some big crazy set that came out in Europe. For some reason, they never released it here, which annoyed me. But I try to get them. I love them. What got you
Well,
drawn into
actually,
that?
I've been into those movies since I was 5 years old. Um, I saw my first Christopher Lee Dracula movie when I was 5, and left a big impression on me. So yes, I've written a lot of books about Hammer. I've also been writing for a magazine called Little Shop of Horrors for over 40 years, and that's mainly about Hammer films. So I'm considered a sort of expert on those, and I've won 2 awards for them. I They're called Rondo Awards, and I'm very proud of those because they were given by my peers. Um, so yeah, I kind of have 2 or 3 hats when I write books. The movie hat and the paranormal hat.
I know I saw recently Hammer got a bunch of deals with particular toy companies and releasing more like figures of those kind of things, like
Yes.
Nika. I'm looking forward to the NECA ones. They always do a good job. There was the Mego ones, which I have some of those, but they weren't the best. But I'm really
Mego
interested.
ones. I have the Mego ones right here. I'll show them to you.
Yeah, I have some of them. I'm behind.
Oh, look.
Nice. Yeah, you got them all. I'm way behind. I know. I
Yep.
hear Nika's doing some. Those are going to be amazing. They just did the Universal monster ones. Nika did, and those are amazing. So I'm looking forward to the Hammer ones for sure. I need to get the rest
Oh,
of the
yeah.
Migos. I
Yeah.
have some of them, but I need to grab some of the other ones on eBay one year for sure. Then you run out of room for this
Yeah, I love
stuff.
that
That's the
stuff.
problem. Yeah, I collect Nosferatu figures. And you'd be surprised how many weird ones there are out there, and
Oh,
it can get expensive of Nosferatu. I have a bunch. I have some Vlad the Impaler figures. I collect those. There's some weird historical Vlad the Impaler by Sideshow. They can get very expensive. I have one of those. That's Vlad the Impaler. But yeah, I love horror. So what's going on with Hammer now? I mean, they've been releasing a few weird little like new movies, but I wish somehow they would get back into like the stuff like they used to do. But I mean, that's asking a lot,
well, the biggest movie they've done in the last few years was The Woman in Black with Daniel Radcliffe,
Yeah.
and that was a big success. And there was a sequel. Um, I think they've got a Jekyll and Hyde movie coming out actually. Um,
Let the Right One
so
In was one they did. I think a movie like that. Let the Right One In. That's based on that
yeah,
Swedish book. They did a movie.
yeah, they did Let Me In.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
another version of that, and I thought that was great. And they've done some very interesting stuff in the last few years. It hasn't been like the classic.
Uh-oh.
Oops. Oops. Oops.
The blob got him. He's frozen in space. We did pretty good though. We're doing
Yeah, but
good.
he'll be able to come back.
I'm
He'll be
still
able.
here.
Roll.
There he
I'm
is.
here.
Okay, you're frozen.
I'm here.
You're frozen, but you can talk.
Can you still hear us okay? I think you're having some phone issues. You're frozen.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, there he goes. There it goes.
Am I
There it
still
goes.
frozen?
No, now you're fine.
The blob got him. Frozen. But tell us some more Hammer stuff. What's some of your favorites growing up with that? I mean, there's so many. I know there are some box sets here in America. I have one. Oh crap! There he goes. There he goes. He's back. He's back. There he goes. There you go. I know there are some box sets. I have one pretty big one that has a lot of Hammer horror movies that I got from America, but I know there's one that was overseas that didn't come here for some reason. But what are some of the classics that you love of Hammer?
Oh gosh, all the Christopher Lee Dracula ones, obviously. The Peter Cushing Frankenstein movies. I love their science fiction Quatermass movies and so on. The Abominable Snowman is one of my favorites. All their vampire movies are great. Actually, a couple of years ago, I was asked to go to London to curate a vampire film festival that was Hammer oriented, and I picked some of my favorites like The Brides of Dracula and Kiss of the Vampire, Vampire Lovers, and I got to introduce Caroline Munro and Madeline Smith and some of the other actresses on stage, which was really fun. And so yeah, I mean, I'm real busy with Hammer stuff all the time. It's not my work; it's my love.
Nice. What was the little TV show they did? Wasn't like Hammer Horror? Like it was like a little show, like different episodes, different stories.
Right. They've done 3 different TV series. They did back in the 60s. They did a show called Journey to the Unknown. And in the 1980s, they did Hammer House of Horror, and then they did Hammer House of Mystery and Suspense. So and actually right now they are doing Let the Right One In. That's co-produced by them with Netflix, I believe.
That's on Showtime.
So,
I've been meaning to watch it.
still
Showtime.
right?
Yeah, that one's on Showtime.
Showtime, that's right. Yeah.
It's on my. It says it's pretty good from what I've seen. I need to check it out. But mystery and suspense. I'll have to look that up.
Very much like the movie. Yep.
Mystery.
Yeah, all the TV shows were good too. I thought.
Is that Mystery and Suspense on DVD? Can you buy it? I don't know.
That one is a little bit harder to find. The Hammer House of Horror is on Blu-ray and DVD.
Yeah, I see it on Amazon. Something weird, but yeah, it's not for sale still. So, and then it's always a different region where you can't see it anyway, or something. So that one I'll never get.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you need to do is get an all-region DVD player or Blu-ray player. That's the secret right there.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I didn't know they did that. So yeah, I'll have to, check it out for sure. And I definitely like Hammer. They're classy. That's why I like them. They're good. They're good. What's the one with the lizard lady? There's some. I forget the name of it. The reptile.
Oh, the reptile.
Yeah, that's one I remember.
Yeah, that's a favorite. Yeah. Yep. That's a good one.
What were the other TV shows? I know you said Mystery and Suspense and House of Horror. Was there another one? That's it?
Journey to the Unknown was the one they did in the 60s.
Huh. I'm trying to save these so I don't forget. Journey to the Unknown. Hammer Horror. So I can look it up later. I'll forget by the time we are done. There it is. But so what do you wrote a book? What's the book? There's a book of Hammer too, right? That you wrote, right?
I've written several. I wrote a book called The Hammer Vampire. Wrote one called The Hammer Frankenstein, Hammer Fantasy and Science Fiction. And I just wrote one called The Hammer Thriller, which is about their suspense thrillers. So I've written a few.
To check those out. Do you have a website or anything?
I don't have a website, but you can find all my books on Amazon if you type in my name.
Okay. And that's Bruce, GHALLENBECK. And so anything else come to mind from your Kinderhook book that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about? Anything you can think of off the cuff?
Well, just that, these things are I think they're ongoing. I mean, if somebody saw the Blob 6 years ago, then I think that's pretty cool. It also confirms my belief that it wasn't just my childhood imagination.
Right.
Somebody else saw it too. So, I just find it very interesting to live around these parts, and I'm always looking and always kind of keeping my eyes and ears open for something strange.
Did the police get involved with the Kinderhook creature at all? Did it get crazy like lynch mobs and stuff like some of these stories where they go find the creature, burn it?
No, not really. The police just want to ignore the whole thing.
Yeah.
I spoke to a policeman once who we have a state troopers barracks in Kinderhook, and he, I don't believe that's even possible. I said, well, that's you're right to not believe it. I probably wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't experienced these things, but there it is.
Definitely. It's not
Do you still have your plaster casts of some of the footprints that you took?
Oh yes, they're still around. Yep, I wouldn't get rid of those.
Yeah. Weren't you out looking for, if I remember right, weren't you out looking, you were at a bridge, and you had decided to just go out and see if you could hear something or see something, and you started hearing this chattering, and it ended with this weird light in the sky. So tell that story, because that's a cool story too.
Yeah, that's that's another strange event. This was in 1982, sort of the height of the Bigfoot activity around here, and I used to work at a radio station in Albany, and I was on the way home. I just thought, I think I'll take a drive around to the bridge where we found those tracks, because a couple of years before that, this person who had been hunting near there had found strange tracks, and those are the ones we made the plaster casts of. We dubbed this bridge Bigfoot Bridge, and it's kind of remote. It's in a spot between sort of main road and another road that's distant, and so it's all wooded. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to stop there tonight and just see if anything happens, which was kind of stupid because I didn't have a camera, I didn't have a tape recorder or anything else. But I just thought, okay, I'll do it. On the way there, I should have had a clue because a black cat crossed my path, and also there were like frogs jumping across the road, and it was just a weird night. So I got to the bridge, and I parked there and turned off the lights and just sat there for a while. And nothing happened. And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna count to 100, and if by the time I count to 100, I don't hear or see anything, I'm gonna leave. So I started mentally counting, and by the time I got up to around 80 or so, I heard, like you said, a kind of a chattering sound in the woods nearby, just across the road. To me, it sounded like a couple of monkeys trying to talk to each other. Only very big monkeys, but I thought, okay. I really wanted to get up and go out from the car and walk across the road to see what it was, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I mean, I was all alone. It was, a deserted road, and I couldn't quite get the nerve. So when I finally did get up the nerve to cross the road, of course, the noises stopped. But at that moment, this white ball of light came up from behind the trees and went straight up into the sky, and then just went out like somebody turned off a light bulb. It was pretty weird. So then I went home. But I kind of wish I had brought at least a tape recorder to tape the sound. But oh well.
I remember when you
first 2020. So
I remember when you first told me that story. You said that when that light went up and disappeared, you had this feeling like you just really didn't know what was going on, that there was just something really weird going on. It was just that's called and it's uncomfortable, and I like the term that has been coined for that, which is the uncanny valley. It's that sense of, oh God, I'm witnessing something that I don't understand. It's beyond me, and it is,
it's like
high.
It's kind of like the way an ant feel when he encounters a toaster or something. I don't know. It's a very weird feeling because you just have no idea what's happening here.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, I made a blog post yesterday, and talked about a couple of UFOs.
You folks are frozen.
Oh, okay. Well, you're frozen. And talked a little bit about a couple of UFO sightings that I had when I was a kid, in 1973, and one of them in particular, I still think about it. It's just really strange. It was it's what's called a pseudostar. I don't know if you've ever heard that terminology, but it's when you're looking at one of the examples is you're looking at a constellation, and there's something wrong about the constellation. Like maybe there's like a star that you thought it's like it's in the wrong place or something, and you're like, what? Am I seeing this correctly, right? Or has the star always been here and I just didn't notice? And I was learning constellations. I was 12 years old. I was learning constellations, and I had just learned, like, Orion, which is easy, and Cassiopeia and a few others, the Dippers, of course, that sort of thing. And I was identifying Orion, and it looked like there was like this extra light in the belt, this extra star. And I looked at it, and I was like, did I count the stars wrong? I mean, and then all of a sudden the extra star got really bright. It like suddenly flared really bright, and then moved to the right like this, and then did this kind of up and down jiggly thing, and then moved to the left and went pew, and it was gone. And I just sat there going, I had no idea. I didn't tell anybody at the time because I thought nobody would believe me, and I wondered if anybody else saw it, but I have since found out that is actually a phenomenon. It is, and it's described in a detail in a book that's called Project Identification, that was written by a guy named Harley Rutledge, who was a physicist who did, as far as we know, the only attempt at a scientific field study of UFOs, and this was in Piedmont, Missouri, in the early to mid 70s. And he and his field observers had those experiences a lot. And another pseudostar phenomenon is you'll see something streaking across the sky like really quickly, and it will come to where a constellation is. And of course, this is the way the constellation appears to us, right? And it'll be streaking, and then it'll stop and superimpose itself over one of the stars in the constellation, and then get very bright or do something weird, pulse or whatever. But the point is that whatever's doing that is somehow aware of how that appears to us, because we're looking at those constellations, and that's what's drawing our attention. And it's obviously closer to us, obviously, than those stars, but somehow it is aware of how that constellation appears to us, and uses the field of those constellations as a means by which to connect, I guess. I don't know, make its presence known. Yeah. So like he had several experiences where they'd be looking at the Big Dipper, And then all of a sudden, right in the middle of the dipper part, there'd be like a light that would show up and flare and then move to different parts of the dipper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's, but I had seen one of those things as a kid, but of course didn't know that it had a name.
Yeah.
So
I didn't either, actually.
You know, and they've had that. There have been observations like that out at Pine Bush. I've talked to some of the people at Pine Bush, and they've had experiences of pseudostars there. So I know that it's not just like a singular thing. It's just odd. It's like, to me, that's evidence of an intelligence of some type, obviously. But
yeah,
what it means, I have no idea.
you know, I mean, that's, it's like, what my grandmother and I saw. I got the impression, I didn't feel that they were like metal ships or anything,
right?
But it seemed like there was an intelligence behind them.
Oh, those,
it seemed like they knew we were looking at them.
You mean the ones that were doing their little dance over the Hudson that you and your grandmother saw out the window, right? Yeah, and other people have seen those,
right?
Seen those kinds of things, that kind of play of those lights,
Yep. And also, the Hudson River and all bodies of water seem to have something to do with UFOs. It's, you kind of wonder, I mean, they've been seen coming in and out of bodies of water.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know. I know that it was maybe about 3 years ago. Yeah, maybe 4 years ago. 4 years ago, my physical trainer, his cousin, one of his first cousins, who he's very close to, who used to live up here, he was staying at a bed and breakfast not too far from where I live, maybe about 4 miles from where I live, overlooking a pool that is called Sturgeon's Lake. It's not too far from where I live. And he was out on the back deck. It was kind of late. And he saw several balls, kind of like what you described, come out of the lake, come out of the pool, and then start sort of zipping around. And he was able to take it. They completely freaked him out. And he was able to get his phone and because it's dark and, phones don't always take really good footage, pictures. He was able to get kind of a couple of pictures or a little bit of film of two of them. And one is kind of a reddish, orangish color, and the other's more white. And they're kind of shooting around. But it scared him to death. And they just sort of, they weren't too far from him because this deck was like kind of, overlooking the lake. So they weren't too far from him. But they freaked him out so bad that he just, he said he started having nightmares and stuff about it. And he actually moved to North Carolina. That's how much they scared him. Just the experience of seeing these odd things, like come out, I don't know. I think I don't know how I would feel if I actually saw that. I mean, although honestly, I have seen something like that. When I lived in Kansas, I lived in this, one of the last places I lived in Kansas when I was getting my master's degree. I lived with my partner in a valley it's called Buck Valley in Kansas. They actually in eastern Kansas do have hills and stuff. They're not like hills here, but it's not Wizard of Oz land. That's further west. But I was with a bunch of friends and we were having like a bonfire thing. It was in the early summer. And we'd already had some weird experiences that night. We had had some weird experiences with like disembodied voices around and stuff, kind of complicated. But then it was pretty late. I had my back to the west of the house. There was like a creek and then it went like up a ridge. And so my back was to that. And so I was facing east and a friend of mine poked me on the shoulder and said, "What is that?" And I turned around and looked, and there was this light that was in the trees. And at first I thought it was like a flash, like a flashlight, like maybe somebody was walking through the woods and, like shining them in the trees. But all of a sudden the light shot up out of the trees and then just sort of, so it was clearly not attached to anything. And it just bounced along the top of the trees like that, just kind of boop, doop, 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 and then it went straight up and it was gone. And we all just sat there. We were like 7 of us. And we were like, okay, then I think it's time to go inside. That was sort of like the group agreement. We were all going to go inside now. None of us had been drinking, or not very much.
Yeah.
Huh?
What color was that light?
It was
what
sort
color
of.
was the light?
It was kind of white. It was sort of a bluish white. It was very distinct. It was not. There was nothing fuzzy about it. It was very. It was like the edges were very defined, and it was at the top of the ridge. But it was it didn't look like it was terribly big. But what was interesting is when it was in the trees, you could see that it would pass behind branches. It would pass behind branches, but it didn't like throw a lot of light out from itself. It was very contained, and but it was when it sort of shot up above the trees, and there were no clouds. It was a cloudless night when it shot up above the trees, and that in a very defined way just sort of bounced along the top of the trees, just kind of boop, ba-doop, 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 and then it was gone. Just shot straight up into the air. It's one of those moments where you just kind of go, okay, then. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it was kind of like I felt that it was sort of waiting for us to notice, and then once we noticed, it sort of showed off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like, here I am, and then took off. It's very odd.
To the blob.
Yeah. I mean, it does, except that it was a very defined round thing.
Yeah.
Wham, I got some good news for you. You know that project identification book?
Yeah.
It's on archive.org as a PDF, and I sent it to
Excellent.
you email. I just sent you the link on Facebook, but I'll send it to you too, Bruce. It's supposed to be a really good UFO book, but you can download the PDF from archive.org.
Oh, that's great.
If you try to find the book, which I was going to do, it's like $170, $80, like one of those weird out of print books that suck. When you find them, you're like, ugh.
No, that's good. I'll be sure, and when I do a blog and stuff, I'll make an announcement about it because it's really.
I just found it.
It's really a decent. I've been telling everybody about it. I mean, I used it as a reference when I did my chapter on Pine Bush in Mysterious Beauty. Used it as a reference. I had read it years and years and years ago as a library book, but didn't purchase it then. And then I tried to purchase it back in 2019, and I paid like $70 for a copy, But now it's like hundreds of dollars. So if there's a free way to get it, and I'd recommend it to you, Bruce, because it's a great story. I mean, you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, I know. So
Yes.
There's this whole thing in H.P. Lovecraft in some of his stories about how you have the scientific guy who gets confronted with really weird stuff, and then gradually it sort of makes him go mad, that kind of thing. Well, what happens in this book, and it's just a book about this guy's study. I mean, at the Harley Rutledge, it's just his account. But when you and he is, as a scientist, as a physicist, he is not aware of some of the kind of larger narratives and and experiences that people have around these things. So that, for example, he doesn't have any idea when he goes to Piedmont from Cape Girardeau, which is about a 70-mile drive. He doesn't have any idea that when he goes to Piedmont and starts actually putting field observers out to try to capture like the trajectory of these things and triangulate their movement and do everything very scientifically. He has no idea that one of the effects of that, and those of us who know about this know this, is that these things will follow you home. and they do. Like within 3 weeks, they follow him home. And he's just reporting on this. He doesn't really get it for a while that there's something going on. And then at some point, and he writes about this, at some point he realizes that he's interacting with whatever this is. And he doesn't speculate about it. He's not like Jacques Vallée. He doesn't, he just observes it. And it makes him very uncomfortable. But he continues to do it. He gets to the point where he can set up his equipment in his front yard and watch this stuff, and his entire family has experiences. But it's just a wonderful book about a guy. It's very scientific, very technical. This was written in the 1970s. He knows tons about cameras and optics, and in fact, some of the mathematics are like I can't even follow it, because I don't really care. But it's a wonderful book for that, because he just tells you what's going on, and you can see that there's this story that's developing about it, and it's fascinating. It's just a fascinating book. I actually did a 3-part video audio blog about this book because it's so interesting, and the guy is so interesting. He's just fascinating. But if you get a chance to read it, I think you'd like it. You could probably come up with a story around it somewhere.
Is this guy still alive?
Oh, no. He died in 2005, I think.
Okay.
He was a professor of physics at Southeastern Missouri State College. And the project identification ran from 1973 to 1980. The book was published in 1981. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a treasure.
That's the kind of thing I like to read, where they take a scientific approach to it.
Yeah. And he really thought that, hey, maybe it's a natural phenomena. I don't know. So let's just, get a bunch of observers in the field and give them all great equipment, and we can start to try to track them and see how fast they're going, how far away they are, how big they are, that kind of thing. He just wanted to get that kind of information. And it's just, well, you just have to read it to see what happens. If only it were that easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If only it becomes really clear by, after a little while that he realizes he's dealing with something that's intelligent.
Yeah.
And it's responding in interesting ways to what they're trying to do. And, but of course, he doesn't try to speculate that much about what it might be. The only thing he does is he says, well, this is what it looks like, and this is what it is acting like. But he doesn't say this is what it is, because there's no way to know.
Right. Well, that's the right approach, I think. Anybody who claims to know what all this stuff is probably wrong, because
right.
I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, well, not definitively, certainly. Oh, let's see.
You're sending it to me. I always like Charles Ford's attitude. His attitude was, well, these are the reports I get. These are the facts I know. It's up to you to make up your own mind what's going on.
Right. Exactly. Oh, yeah.
I also like what Charles Ford said one of my favorite quotes of his is, I think we're someone's property.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, I kind of feel that way sometimes.
yeah. Oh, this is excellent. Thank you so much for finding this, Jeffrey.
It's a little unnerving.
Yeah, I sent it to you too, Bruce, and it's just a link where you can download the PDF at archive.org. But sometimes I feel like I broke some kind of interstellar universal criminal, and I was cast down here into a prison, into this body. It's like this is like babysitting on Earth. So they don't have anywhere else to put us, just throw us here, prison planet. But some days feel like that more than others, that's for sure. There's something to it. And then lately, some of the crazy violence, like we always have violence, but it just seems like when you read all these things about pole shifts and magnetic fields and the Earth's core going backwards, it's like it reminds me of The Crazies by George Romero, and then the remake where everybody goes crazy. It just seems like everybody's losing their freaking mind. But that crazy sicko that killed those 4 girls in Idaho just while they're sleeping. Like, there's always been stuff like that.
Three girls and a guy.
Yeah, just terrifying. You can't even sleep in your house without some nut coming in and stabbing you to death. Some Ted Bundy wannabe. But let's see here, everybody. If you're listening from Roku, make sure you check out churchofmabusradio.com. That's Church of Mabus radio.com. And you got a Wham here representing.
And Bruce's book right here.
Yes.
Bruce's book.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, summon the creature with the book. The Kinderhook Creature and Beyond, a personal reminiscence. Bruce G. Hallenbeck and Small Town Monsters Publishing. You can go there. They got lots of his book. You can get the book on Amazon too, I'm guessing. And then you can also get their documentaries there. I like their documentaries. I'm behind, though. I need to get some that I don't have. I have a bunch, but there's some I don't have. The Skinwalker thing, I missed that one. That's always a fascinating story that I don't even like to say that word. They're going to come get you at night for just saying their name. But definitely keep us in the loop, and we're glad we got the tech stuff ironed out. Next time, if we get you on, just remember phone.
Yeah, that'll work.
What's so weird, it's like earlier in the day I felt this weird anxiety and I didn't know what it was, and then I realized when all that was happening, so that's what that was happening in the future. But the good thing is we ironed it out, so and we saved the show, so it was good. There was not really that much of a problem. We got you on time and everything was ready to rock and roll for sure. And what's going on? I noticed there was a Hammer comic that was from Titan called that Captain Kronos. I never got those. I got into comics not too long ago, and I love them, but it's also a mistake at the same time because it's just insane trying to keep up with all of the stuff. You like so many of them, there's so many different ones. And horror, there's so many horror ones. Yeah. Like, I got to get that one. No, you can't. But it's like
it's all of it. It's all of it.
8 spawns. There's a gunslinger western spawn now. Damn it. It's like too much, to keep up with. But I love Hammer Horror. I love Hammer Horror, so definitely love to get that.
That makes 2 of them.
Makes me want to watch it. Dig up my DVDs and start watching it. There's a bunch I haven't seen. There's a lot of them. There's some I've seen a lot of them, but there's a lot I haven't that I still have. I got some weird one that has a bunch of the old ones on there, like a bunch. It was like $60 or something. It has like a ton of them on it, like a DVD set or Blu-ray set. Yeah, it came out not too long ago, but there's a lot of like weird ones that are old on there that I haven't seen. I have to check those out for sure. But yeah, we appreciate it so much, Bruce. It's been great. And thanks so much. And we've enjoyed it. Keep us in the loop on future projects, and we'll get you back sometime. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Glad it finally worked.
Yes.
Me too.
The blob tried to stop us. The blob. The good blob. He doesn't want to eat you and assimilate you. He just wants to be your friend. He wants to be your Mother Mary. Right. That is weird.
Just wants Screw your tech up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shapeshift into the Virgin Mary. Yeah, there's going to be a Passion of the Christ too. Can't wait, right?
Oh God, I could do completely without all of that.
Yeah, I'd have to watch it once.
No. You know, it's just Christmas. It's Christian porn.
It's
Yeah,
Jim
wouldn't watch
Caviezel.
it.
BDSM.
Jim Caviezel. He's like
Yeah.
likes adrenochrome and Q. So it'll be there'll be a Q symbol on Jesus, a QAnon symbol. It's insanity. We're not a political show, so let's stop it. But thanks for listening to Church of Mabus Radio. If you're a new listener tonight, you can check us out, Church of Mabus, MABUS, radio.com. And yeah, that's the weird thing from Nostradamus. We're doing the show, we're bringing forth the darkness. So have a good night. I'm just playing. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Bye, Bruce.
All right, take care, Bruce.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right.